Hey, welcome back. On to some alarming news now. The 2018 Corporate Governance Report shows the country's corporate governance controls have regressed to an all-time low. The report also shows there is a widening gap between what business leaders say and what their company culture promotes. The report comes in the wake of corporate scandals that have hit the country in recent months. For more on this, we are now talking to Claudel van Eck from the Institute of Internal Auditors of South Africa, which launched the report. Claudel, thank you so much for coming through and talking to me. So it seems that this is really about perceptions, right? You spoke to these people that you say are audit executives, and you did a whole survey. What did you find?
Right, so chief audit executives, we specifically asked them about what they see happening within their organizations. Overall, the index has dropped about 6.6%, which doesn't bode well. The two areas where we've seen the greatest drop is in ethics and assurance, and coincidentally, the two areas that we're most concerned about in the country at the moment. When we asked the question around whether ethics is an important part of the culture, only 48% of the chief audit executives strongly agreed that ethics is an important part of the culture. Now, if one goes back in the history of the index, in 2013 we started with the index, and that same question had 66% of the chief audit executives strongly agreeing. So you have about an 18% drop over the last few years, which is significant.
So if we put a story to that finding, as you said, I mean, that's a significant drop. You were at a situation where you said 66%, right?
Yes.
Back then believed that ethics is an integral or important part of their organizational culture. What does that tell us? Does it tell us that it is their sense, these chief audit executives that you spoke to, that the company culture doesn't consider ethics to be that important, or does it say that they themselves as individuals don't consider this part to be an integral part of their work?
I think what it's saying is what the chief audit executives are observing within the organization, right, in terms of the overall culture, the behavior of the individuals within the organization, that there is a decline. I think that part of it is also because we've had so many conversations around ethics lately that more and more people are starting to realize, oops, that thing that I was doing, I didn't realize it's unethical. Now that it's been exposed as unethical, people are starting to reflect more. I think there's deeper application of mind. So we can't 100% be certain that there has been an absolute decline, but there may be more awareness around what ethics is, and therefore our critique about what is going on within our organizations may be coming through a different lens. But that, of course, also, if one looks at it in terms of the tone at the top, there's a gap between what we see the chief audit executives say, the leaders are saying in the organization. So they're making the right noises, but not enough effort being put into interventions to ensure that the culture in the organization is ethical.
So, I mean, the picture is already quite bad if we're talking about only 48% of these chief audit executives believing that ethics is an integral and important part of their organizational culture. But it's even worse when you look at what those in government believe. For instance, in provincial government, you had some startling findings there.
Yeah, absolutely. What we've seen across the board in the index, and the index has got 7 different dimensions. Overall, there is the sentiment in the public sector, if you compare it to the private sector, is definitely a lot more negative. It may very well be that because there is a greater sense of public interest within the public sector, because of the nature of what people do in the public sector, they serve the public at a greater extent than you would find in the private sector. When generally speaking, when we talk to our members, what I do find is that amongst the internal auditors in the public sector, there seems to be a lot more awareness. And it may just, as I said, be the nature of the environment that they find themselves in.
But only 30% at provincial government level believed that the ethics was an integral part of their units and their departments. That should worry us.
No, absolutely. Absolutely, it should really, really, really worry us. But there are more worrying factors within the index as well. So if you look at the 2 dimensions where we scored the lowest, is performance and external risk. So if you look at the competitiveness of the country, and then you look at how we rated in terms of performance through the eyes of the chief audit executives, big concern. So if we ask the question, if you look at the resources that the organization has, and you look at the output, is that output at optimal level in relation to what you have in terms of resources? 19%, strongly agreed.
Only 19% believed that the resources that are channeled towards functions such as internal audit are adequate to help them achieve the outcomes that are expected, that internal audit should really be the eyes and ears of good ethics and governance in the organization.
Correct. So there are two different aspects to it. The resources being allocated to internal audit, 35% strongly agreed that they have the necessary resources, and that in itself is still worrying. But the 19% has got to do with the organizations, the overall organization delivery. Mm-hmm. So if one looked at so if I grab an example, and it's not a real example, so if you take Eskom, for example, if you look at all the resources in Eskom, and you look at Eskom's output, is it at optimal level in relation to what it has? 19%. Essentially, if one looks at it across the board. So that is worrying.
So someone will say then, no wonder we've had some of these big scandals that we've seen recently, that many people say, where was internal audit when VBS was, experiencing the kind of looting that it was experiencing when Steinhoff was misstating and misrepresenting their finances? Where were they? I mean, we can focus about the external auditors, which, we've had a great focus and emphasis on, but I guess this sort of helps us to sort of say, aha, we now get it. This is partly why these things were not picked up.
Absolutely. So what the index shows is three things in the assurance dimension. The one is that the leadership often still don't understand the mandate and the role of your assurance providers, so they don't really understand what the role of internal audit is. So, and that will then translate in not enough resources being allocated to internal audit. But another dimension, a question that we asked in the assurance dimension, where we were very concerned about the result, is about combined assurance. So is the organization using a combined assurance model? So essentially what it means is external audit is an assurance provider. Internal audit is an assurance provider. So you've got these assurance providers, and you want to see that they cover all the major risks within the organization. So you have to have a view, a dashboard, so the leadership can see that everything is being covered. But if you don't have that, you're going to have duplication of effort, but you also may very well have significant areas where things fall through the cracks.
Just broadly, Claudel, if we sort of take it away slightly from the focus of the study, how much of a crisis is the auditing profession in the country? I mean, I know it's a rather broad question, but I mean, it is under focus given some of the developments that have happened, some of the investigations that we have seen by such organizations such as URBA, for example, and the implications there and the naming of people who are supposed to be the people who are the eyes and ears of all of us in these government institutions as well as in the corporate sector. Then you see them being named, for instance, in the VBS situation.
Yes.
How much of a crisis are we facing?
Look, crisis is relative, right? I think that what is happening at the moment in South Africa is very important in that it is bringing to the surface those areas where we need to self-reflect. Do I think that the whole of the auditing profession is in a significant crisis? No. I think the majority of the auditors are doing good work, but they are within the auditing profession. What we need to do more of is ensuring that those who are not following the standards, who are not conforming or making sure that they live up to the code of ethics or the code of conduct, that we flush them out and that we deal with them indecisively so. But certainly, if I look at what's happening in South Africa and compared to what is happening in the rest of the world, for me, the positive in all of this is that we're having the conversations and we're dealing with it, and we can now put measures in place. So if one looks at KPMG, for example, they've put measures in place in terms of self-correcting that we've never seen in the firms before, which is a good thing. So if we can make sure that we stay on that path of correcting, I can see a better future for us.
But are there enough disincentives for people to not stray from what, for lack of a better word, is the code of good practice of auditors? Are there enough consequences? Do people know that, if you stray from this, if you take your eye off the ball and you don't do what you're supposed to do, you will pay a heavy price, and therefore it's in your best interest to do what you're supposed to do?
If I look at a professional body like SAICA, for example, one can certainly say that when they take disciplinary action against a chartered accountant, the worst they can do is to take that designation away. Now, the value of that designation in the market is what the real punishment then is if you take that away. But more importantly is the reporting. So if the general public or those who come across auditors, chartered accountants, whatever it may be, professionals, if they don't go and report, the professional body's hands are tied. Then they can't take action. So I think there needs to be a self-reflection for us and the general public as well, is when have I spoken up when I saw something wrong? The professional body won't know. They can't smell out of the thin air.
All right, Claudel, thank you so much for coming through, sharing the results from your survey as well as your insights about the state of the auditing profession. That was the Institute of Internal Auditors South Africa CEO, Claudel van Eck.